My family believed my sister and raised me at 19. I was 19 when my family erased me. But the truth is, it started long before the dinner. In our town, people didn't really move on from anything. They just layered new routines on top of old grudges. Same streets, same faces, same polite smiles that carry 10 years of history behind them. Our house sat on the edge of town, 2 blocks from the high school, close enough that on Friday nights you could hear the distant swell of cheering, the muffled speaker announcements, the occasional firework somebody set off behind the bleachers. Inside, everything looked like normal. A kitchen that always smelled faintly like dish soap and coffee. A calendar on the fridge with my mother's handwriting. Neat, careful, almost nervous. My father's boots by the back door, lined up like soldiers. The living room couch with the same indentation on the left side from years of him sitting there after work. And my sister, Rachel. She was 3 years younger than me, and somehow the whole house breathed differently around her. Like everyone was always quietly adjusting the temperature so she wouldn't get uncomfortable. When Rachel cried, when she got that tremble in her lip, everything stopped. My father's anger turned into concern. My mother's voice softened into that careful tone she used like a bandage. Even the air felt like it changed. If I tried to explain myself, I was arguing. If Rachel explained herself, she was sharing. I wasn't jealous of her as a kid. Not at first. I just thought she was fragile. And to be fair, Rachel did have anxiety. Real anxiety. But she also learned early that tears could be a tool, not just a symptom. That's what everyone said. Rachel's sensitive. Rachel takes things to heart. Be gentle with your sister. She doesn't handle stress like you do. And I did it. I learned early how to swallow my frustration, how to say it's fine when it wasn't, how to be the one who didn't make a mess, the one who didn't raise their voice, the one who didn't break anything. Because if you didn't break anything, you didn't become a problem. And in our family, being a problem was the worst thing you could be. My father wasn't cruel exactly. He wasn't the type to scream and throw things. He was worse than that. He was quiet. He could disapprove without saying a word, and you'd feel it like pressure in your chest. He'd look at you like you were a project that had gone wrong, like he was trying to figure out where the defect was. My mother kept peace the way some people keep a garden, always pulling weeds, always smoothing over rough spots, always making sure nobody saw the rot underneath. And Rachel watched all of it. She learned the rules faster than I did. She learned what expression to wear, what tone to use, when to cry, when to go silent, how to make her sadness feel like an emergency. If I'm being honest, there were little moments that should have warned me, like the time I was 16 and I came home from a shift at the grocery store. I'd been saving money for college because I knew my parents weren't going to cover everything. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't entitled. I had cash in an envelope in my desk. Not a lot, but enough that losing it would hurt. That day, the envelope was lighter. I counted once, then again. $20 missing. It's not even a dramatic amount, but I remember standing there with that sick, floating feeling, staring at the open drawer. When I asked my mom, she got defensive right away. Are you accusing someone? I'm just asking if anyone's been in my room. Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table, swinging her foot, tapping her nails on her phone. She didn't look up. My father said, "Maybe you misplaced it." I said I didn't. Rachel finally looked up and made this face, almost offended, like I'd insulted her without words. "Wow," she said, "that's paranoid." My mother sighed, and the subject changed. That was it. No one searched, no one questioned, no one even entertained the idea that something had been taken. I learned a lesson. Evidence didn't matter if it was inconvenient. The older I got, the more I became the one who had an attitude. Not because I was mean, because I stopped smiling automatically. I stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I started saying things like, "That is not what happened," when Rachel would rewrite a story in front of people. My mother hated that. Not because she thought I was wrong, because it made the room tense, and tension was the enemy. So she'd do what she always did. She'd correct me. "Don't start. Let it go. Why do you always have to make things difficult?" Meanwhile, Rachel could say something passive-aggressive that sliced right through your ribs, and everyone would act like it was nothing. By the time I was 19, I was planning my escape in quiet ways. College in another city, a dorm room, a job, a life where my name didn't come with a reputation already attached. I wasn't running away from them, I told myself. I was just growing up, living, like everyone does. I had a savings account that I'd built slowly. Paychecks, birthday money, graduation gift checks from relatives who thought I was such a responsible young man. My father insisted the account be connected to the family structure. He framed it like safeties. He wanted it set up as a joint account, family structure, he called it. He said it meant protection. What it really meant was, he could remove me whenever he wanted. "If something happens, we can help," he said. It felt normal. It felt responsible. It felt like trust. The night everything happened, the air was already wrong, before Rachel even stood up. It was a Tuesday, if I remember right. One of those evenings where the sky goes dark early, and the streetlights flicker on like tired eyes. I came home from my shift with the smells of cardboard and warehouse dust still on me. I remember washing my hands too long, scrubbing like I could remove the day from my skin. Dinner was meatloaf, my mother's comfort meal, the one she made when she wanted the house to feel stable. My father sat at the head of the table, shoulders relaxed, like he was the judge about to hear a case he already decided. Rachel barely ate. She pushed peas around her plate, eyes glossy. My mother kept glancing at her in that worried way, like she could sense a storm building. I asked, "Everything okay?" Rachel didn't answer me. She looked at my parents instead, like I didn't exist. Then she set her fork down and stood. Her chair scraped the tile with that sharp sound that makes your spine tighten. She took a breath like she was about to perform, and she said, "I need to finally tell the truth." I remember a weird, stupid thought popping into my head. What truth? About what? My father straightened. My mother put her hand on Rachel's arm, gentle, encouraging. "Honey," my mother stuttered. Rachel shook her head, tears already forming, perfectly timed. "No, I have to. I can't keep being scared." My stomach dropped, and then she said my name. "He's been stealing." Rachel's voice cracked in the right place, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "He's been taking money from you," she said to our parents, and I didn't want to say anything because he told me not to. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard. like my brain refused to translate the words properly. I blinked, once, slow. Rachel, I said, careful. What are you talking about? She looked at me like I was a shadow on the wall. Then she said, Don't. Don't do that thing where you act calm so everyone thinks I'm crazy. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father's eyes narrowed. Rachel kept going, fast now, like the dam had broken. She said he threatened her. My mother whispered, like repeating it made it real. Rachel nodded hard, tears spilling. He told me if I said anything he'd ruin me, she said. He said no one would believe me anyway. I felt my face heat up, then go cold. Stop, I said. And even that word came out wrong. Too sharp, too desperate. My father immediately took it as proof. Don't you tell her to stop, he said, voice low. I looked at him, waiting for the moment he'd ask the obvious question. Why would he do that? When did this happen? Show me. Prove it. But he didn't. He didn't ask for details. He didn't ask for dates. He didn't ask for amounts. He didn't ask for anything that would require him to doubt her. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, like something inside him clicked into place. And he said, I knew something was off. That sentence didn't even feel like it belonged to the moment. It sounded like he'd been saving it, like he'd been waiting for permission to say it. Rachel's shoulders shook as she cried. My mother whispered, Oh my God, Rachel. And I sat there trying to understand how reality could tilt so quickly. I didn't steal anything, I said. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. This is insane. Rachel pointed at me, trembling. See? That's what he does, she said. He makes you feel crazy. My father's jaw tightened. You've been cold, he said to me. Detached, like you don't care about anyone. What does that have to do with money? He ignores the question. He said, I've suspected for a while you had something wrong in you. My mother didn't defend me. She didn't say, what? She didn't say, let him explain. She just stared at Rachel like Rachel was the only person in the room who mattered. That silence, my mother's silence, hit me harder than my father's words. Because my father could be rigid. But my mother was supposed to be the one who knew me. I stood up so suddenly, my chair knocked into the table. The plates rattled. I can show you my pay stubs, I said, voice rising. I can show you my bank statements. I can show you. My father slammed his palm down once. Not a dramatic slam, a controlled one, like a gavel. Enough. I froze. He pointed toward the hallway. Go, he said. Pack what you need and get out. My mouth opened, but nothing came. I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't look at me. She looked at Rachel, and she said, softly, like an apology meant for the wrong person, we need Rachel to feel safe. That sentence, that was the moment I realized I didn't have a family anymore. I walked to my room like I was underwater. Every step felt unreal. I pulled the backpack from the closet and stuffed it with whatever my hands touched. Jeans, a hoodie, my charger, a toothbrush, a notebook. I remember grabbing my old baseball cap like it could anchor me to who I used to be. When I came back down the hallway, my father was standing by the front door. He didn't come closer. He didn't say my name. He just held the door open, like I was a stranger. Rachel was on the couch and wrapped in a blanket. My mother, beside her, stroking her hair. Rachel looked up at me with red eyes. And there it was, so quick I almost missed it. A flicker. Not fear, not sadness, something else. Control. A tiny, satisfied stillness. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked out. The night air hit my face and I realized I was shaking. Not from cold, from shock. I sat in my car for maybe 10 minutes, staring at the house. I kept thinking the door would open. My mother would run out barefoot, crying, saying, "Wait, we made a mistake." But the porch light stayed still. No movement, no footsteps, just the silence. So I drove. I didn't have a plan. I just drove until the streets stopped looking familiar. And sometime after midnight, I parked behind a gas station and slept in the driver's seat with my backpack in my lap, like it was the only thing I owned. In the morning, my phone showed no service. Then a bar appeared for a second. A notification popped up. Account disconnected. At first, I thought it was a tower issue. Then I checked my account. Disconnected. They'd shut it off. That's when fear finally replaced shock. Because being kicked out was one thing, but being cut off, like a line was severed, meant they were not expecting me to come back. They weren't expecting a conversation. They weren't leaving space for doubt. They were building a new story. And in that story, I was already the villain. I drove to work anyway, because I didn't know what else to do. My manager took one look at my face and asked, "You okay?" I said, "Family stuff." I didn't tell him the truth, because I didn't understand the truth yet. 2 days later, he called me into the office. His eyes were uncomfortable, like he didn't want to meet mine. He said, "Look, people are talking." Later, I found out my mom had called him first. She said she was warning him that I might take cash from the register or inventory from the bag. I felt my stomach drop again. "What people?" He cleared his throat. "Your family said there's a situation," he said, "and some customers heard, and I waited." He finally said, "It's not good for the image, man." I laughed once, the same laugh I'd done at dinner. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. It was, "You are firing me because of aroma." He shrugged, helpless. "I'm sorry." He wasn't sorry enough to keep me. That's how it spread. Not like a scream, like smoke, quietly, through cracks. By the end of the week, friends weren't replying to my messages. People I'd known since kindergarten couldn't meet up. A buddy I'd lifted weights with for 2 years suddenly had plans every time I asked. My aunt, my favorite aunt, texted me, "If you did something, just admit it and get help." I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. I hadn't been charged. No police, no investigation, just a story, and my family's belief. That was enough. A week after the dinner, I tried to access my savings. It was tied to my dad's profile, joint access, so I never realized how easily he could lock me out. This is the college money. The account my father had insisted be connected. The one I trusted. The login didn't work. I tried again. Locked. I called the bank, but the woman on the phone said politely, "Your access has been removed." My throat went dry. "Removed? By who?" "I'm sorry," she said. "I can't provide details." I drove to the branch. I walked in with my ID in my hands, shaking. Does the manager come out? A man who'd known my father for years. He didn't smile. He said quietly, "Your parents requested I cut him off. I need my money," I said. "That's mine." He didn't argue. He just looked sad and said, "You'll need to speak to them." I walked out of the bank feeling like my skin didn't fit. Because that was the moment I understood. They weren't just mad. They were erasing the future I'd built. And they were doing it calmly, legally, like they were cleaning up a mess. The next months were not one dramatic spiral. They were worse, they were slow, they were humiliating. I slept on couches first, friends who still answered, at least at the beginning. Then those couches disappeared one by one. I learned how quickly family trouble makes people nervous. I took random jobs, unloading trucks, cleaning floors, after clothes, washing dishes until my fingers cracked. I stopped eating full meals. Not because I wanted to lose weight, because hunger was easier than panic. My body became smaller. My world became smaller. Some nights I sat in my car in a parking lot and watched families walk into restaurants together, laughing, holding doors open for each other. And I felt like I was watching a movie I used to be in. And then the credits rolled. I tried to fight it at first. I sent messages to my parents, long ones, short ones, angry ones, calm ones. I offered proof pay stubs, schedules, bank records. I begged them to meet, to look me in the eyes, to ask me a question. The answer when it came was always the same sentence. We need Rachel to feel safe. That was the religion now. Safety over truth, peace over facts, Rachel over me. And I was learning the hardest lesson of my life. Sometimes you don't lose people because you did something wrong. You lose them because they needed a villain to keep their world simple. The first winter after I left, I stopped feeling like a person. I felt like a problem that had slipped out of its container. I wasn't living anywhere consistently. I was staying places, temporary, conditional. Always aware that one wrong mood, one wrong question, one wrong rumor could make me unwelcome. I kept my backpack packed, even when I was indoors. That's what homelessness does. It teaches you to be ready to disappear. There was a week I slept in a storage unit. Not the unit itself, I wasn't breaking. A guy from one of my jobs, an older man named Curtis, ran a small storage place on the side of town. He saw me nodding off during break one day and asked, "Where you sleeping?" I lied and said, "With a friend." He stared at me for a long moment and said, "You don't look like someone with a friend." That night he handed me a key and said, "There's an office. It has a couch. Don't steal anything. Don't make it a habit." Well, I didn't ask questions. I said, "Thank you," like it was a prayer. The office smelled like dust and old paperwork. The couch had stains. But it was inside. It had a roof. It had a space heater that made the air dry and warm. I slept in my clothes. I woke up at 4 a.m. every morning because my body didn't trust comfort anymore. And when I looked at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror, hollow cheeks, tired eyes, I didn't recognize who I was becoming. Some nights, when it was quiet, my brain replayed the dinner like a cruel loop. Rachel standing up, the scrape of her chair, the way my father didn't ask questions, my mother's silence. I kept thinking if I had said it differently, if I had stayed calmer, if I had cried, would they have believed me? Then I'd get furious at myself for even asking. Because the truth was simpler. They didn't want to believe me. Believing me would mean admitting they were capable of destroying their own son. Believing Rachel let them feel righteous, protective, good. I stopped going on social media, not because I didn't care, because every time I opened it, I saw pieces of my old life. Friends posting photos at the diner, at football games, at birthday parties. And I realized the world had kept turning and without me. And worse, it was turning against me. Once I saw a comment under the mutual friend's photo. Someone wrote, "Isn't that the guy who The comment was deleted a few minutes later, but I'd seen it, and that was enough to make me feel sick for a full day. I started keeping a small notebook, not for poetry, for facts, because facts were the only thing that stayed true when stories changed. I wrote down where I worked, what I earned, where every dollar went, dates, names. It was obsessive, but it was also survival. If the world was going to decide who I was, I needed something that reminded me of what was real. Sometimes I wrote conversations word for word afterward because I was terrified that one day even my memory would betray me. The turning point wasn't a big dramatic moment. It was a phone call I didn't make. It was late December, 2 days before Christmas. I was sitting in the storage office, listening to the wind hit the metal walls like fists. I had my phone in my hand. I typed my mother's number. I stared at it. And I realized something. If I called her, I would be begging. I would be offering my dignity in exchange for the chance to exist again. And even if she answered, even if she cried, even if she said she missed me, the truth wouldn't change. She'd still been silent at the table. She'd still watched me live. She'd still chosen Rachel's comfort over my life. So I deleted the number, not out of spite, out of clarity. And in that moment, something in me hardened, not into hatred, but into a quiet understanding. No one was coming to save me, so I had to build a life that didn't require their approval. That's when I began planning the move. Not dreaming, planning. A different city. A place where my name didn't mean anything. A place where no one had heard the story already. I didn't even care if I was lonely. Loneliness was safer than being erased. The first night I arrived in the new city, I didn't unpack. Not because I was tired. Because unpacking meant admitting this was real. It meant admitting I wasn't temporarily away. I was gone. The apartment was barely an apartment. A studio with beige walls, an old carpet that smelled like someone else's cooking, and a window that faced a brick wall so close it felt like the building was leaning in to listen. The landlord didn't ask many questions. He looked at my ID, asked for the deposit, and handed me a key with a tag that said 3B. No smile, no welcome. And I loved him for it. Because he didn't know my family. He didn't know my town. He didn't know the story. To him, I was just a guy paying rent. It was the first time in months I felt like I could breathe. I sat on the floor with my backpack beside me and listened to the silence. City silence is different. It isn't peaceful, it's layered. Distant sirens. A neighbor's TV through a wall. Footsteps in the hallway. Someone's laugh outside at 2 a.m. But it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like life happening without me as the center of the rumor. I slept with my phone charging next to my head like a weapon. I woke up 3 times. Every time I heard a sound, my body jolted like someone was about to kick my door down and drag me back home. But nobody came. No one even knocked. In the morning I made instant coffee in a chipped mug I bought from a thrift store, and I stared at the steam like it was proof that I still existed. I'd found a warehouse job before I moved. A distribution center on the edge of the city, the kind of place that never truly sleeps. Night shifts, heavy lifting, inventory scanning, loading docks lit by harsh white lights. They paid decently. They didn't care about your past. They cared about whether you showed up. That was all I wanted. My first night, I walked in wearing steel-toe boots that weren't broken in yet. My feet hurt before I even clocked in. A supervisor named Ray handed me a vest and a scanner. He barely looked at my face. "Your lane is 12, he said. "Don't screw up barcodes. If you're confused, ask. If you pretend you know and you don't, I'll know." As it was the entire orientation. No welcome speech, no, "we're a family here," just rules, they're perfect. The work was brutal. Not movie montage, brutal. Real brutal. You sweat under fluorescent lights. Your arms ache so deep it feels like the bone is tired. Your hands go numb from tape guns and cardboard edges. Your back becomes a constant complaint. But the pain had a weird gift. It kept my brain quiet. For 10 hours at a time, I didn't replay the dinner. I didn't hear Rachel's voice. I didn't picture my mother's silence. I just scanned, lifted, stacked, moved, over and over. And every beep of the scanner felt like a tiny, stupid victory. I'm here. I'm working. I am not dead. The people on night shift weren't friendly right away. Night shift people are different. They don't trust easily. They've seen too much. They don't waste energy on small talk unless they mean it. Then there was a guy named Marcus who walked next to me on lane 13. Big dude. Tattoos, quiet eyes. The first week he said maybe 5 words to me total. Then one night, my scanner froze mid-task. It wouldn't reset. I tried not to panic. That old fear rose up. If I mess up, I lose everything. Marcus watched me struggle for a minute, then reached over. He pressed 2 buttons, held them, waited. The scanner restarted. He handed it back like it was nothing. "Hold those," he said, "always." I nodded. A few minutes later he tossed me a protein bar without looking at me. "Eat," he said. That was the closest thing to kindness I'd had in a long time. I sat in the break room later with that bar in my hand and realized that my throat hurt. Not from hunger, from emotion I didn't know how to carry anymore. Slowly, the city became less alien. I learned which corner store didn't overcharge, which bus line was late every morning, which laundromat was clean, which streets to avoid at night. I learned the names of the people in my building. Not all of them, just enough to feel like a human presence existed around me. There was an older woman across the hall named Mrs. Cole, who always smelled like lavender detergent. The first time she saw me struggling with groceries, she said, "You're new." I said, "Yeah." She stared at me like she could see my exhaustion under my skin. "You got family here?" she asked. And I had this sharp moment of almost saying yes, out of reflex. But I didn't. I said, "No." She nodded once. Then she said, "Then don't work yourself into the ground. Nobody will stop you." And she went inside. That sentence haunted me, because she was right. Nobody was watching out for me anymore. So I had to learn to watch out for myself. I started taking online classes after the first 3 months, not because I was suddenly inspired, because I was terrified of staying stuck. Warehouse work was good for survival, but I didn't want my life to be just survival. I chose arms and practical, logistics, inventory systems, basic business certifications, stuff that was boring, stuff that meant stability. I'd get off a 10-hour shift, shower, eat something cheap, then sit at my tiny table with my laptop and stare at modules until my eyes burned. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with my head on the keyboard. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, because in the dream I was back at the dinner table and my father was telling me to live again. But every time I finished the quiz, every time I got a certificate badge, it felt like I was building bricks under my own feet. A foundation nobody could lock me out of. The holidays were the hardest. Not because I missed them, because my body remembered them. When Thanksgiving came around, I went to work like it was a normal night. The warehouse had a skeleton crew. People were quieter than usual. Marcus offered me half his sandwich without a word. In the break room, someone played a muted football game on their phone. At midnight, a guy from Lane 9 said, "You going anywhere after?" I shrugged. "Home." He nodded like he understood something deeper. "Same," he said. When I got back to my apartment that morning, the city streets were empty. I stood in the hallway outside my door, with my key in my hand, and I realized something. No one was going to call me. No happy Thanksgiving. No "we miss you." No apology. Just silence. And it didn't hit like a punch anymore. It hit like weather. Cold. Familiar. Unavoidable. I went inside, ate cereal from the box, and watched the sun rise against that brick wall outside my window. And I told myself, if they wanted me, they would have looked for me. By year 2, I had routines. Routines were my new religion. Wake up, work, gym, class, sleep, repeat. It wasn't exciting, but it was mine. I made 2 real friends outside work. One was a guy named Eli from an online course forum. We met in person for the first time at a coffee shop. He was shorter than I expected, wore glasses, talked too fast. He asked me what brought me to the city. I almost lied. But something in me was tired of lying. I said I needed to start over. He didn't press. He just nodded and said, "Same." That simple acceptance felt like water on dry skin. The other friend was a woman named Tasha, who lived 2 floors down. She worked mornings at a hospital and always looked half awake in the elevator. One day the elevator got stuck between floors for 15 minutes. It should have been nothing, but the enclosed space made my chest tighten. I could feel my breath getting shallow. Tasha noticed. She said, "Hey, look at me." I forced myself to. She said, "Name 5 things you can see." I blinked. The panel, your shoes, the light, the scratch on the door, my hands. "Good," she said. "Now 4 things you can feel." By the time the elevator moved again, my heart had slowed. When we finally got out, she looked at me like she wasn't judging. She said, "Panic attacks." I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. She just said, "It gets better. But you gotta stop pretending it didn't hurt." Then she walked away. I stood there in the hallway, stunned. Because she just named the thing I had been avoiding. It hurt. And I had been surviving by acting like it didn't. The first time I talked about my family out loud was almost 3 years after I left. Not to a therapist, not in a dramatic breakdown, to Marcus of all people. We were in the parking lot after shift. It was winter, breath turning white, hands numb. Marcus lit a cigarette and said, "You don't talk much." I shrugged. "You do enough," I said. He exhaled smoke and said, "You run from something?" My stomach tightened. I wanted to deny it, but something about the way he said it, without accusation, made it impossible. So I said quietly, "Yeah." He waited. I stared at the snow piled near the curb, and then I told him the simplest version. "My sister lied," I said. "My parents believed her. They cut me off." Marcos didn't react like it was shocking. He didn't say, "No way." He didn't say, "Family wouldn't do that." He just nodded once. "People pick the story that lets them sleep," he said. I looked at him. He flicked ash. "Sometimes you don't fit the story," he continued. "So they cut you out." That was the first time someone said something that made me feel seen, not pitied, seen. Around year 5, things finally started to feel stable enough that I could stop flinching. I got promoted to shift lead. Not a huge deal, but it meant I wasn't just moving boxes anymore. It meant responsibility, trust, a little more money. I moved into a better place. Still small, but with a real view. Not a brick wall, a patch of sky. I bought a second-hand couch that didn't smell like strangers. I bought a real bed frame. I started cooking actual food instead of eating whatever fit in the microwave. Little things. But each little thing felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. And the strangest part, the more stable I became, the less I cared about being cleared. Because the truth was, I'd already built a life without them. The town could think whatever it wanted. My parents could believe whatever they wanted. My sister could keep her story. I was no longer living for their approval. I was living because I refused it to disappear. I stopped checking my phone on holidays. At first it was self-protection. Later it became habit. Christmas came and went. Birthdays came and went. Mother's Day, Father's Day, nothing. Sometimes, late at night, I'd feel this faint ache, like a phantom limb. But it wasn't longing, it was grief. Not for who they were, for who I thought they were supposed to be. Then, almost 10 years later, my phone buzzed during lunch break. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But some instinct made me open the message. Just one line. We need to talk. And the name under it was my mother's. I stared at the message for a full minute. Not because I didn't understand the words, because my body didn't know how to react anymore. We need to talk. It was so simple, so casual, like she was texting about a grocery list, like she hadn't watched my life collapse with her own eyes. My first instinct was to delete it, not out of anger, out of instinct. Because every time my family entered my head, it still came with that old feeling, like the floor might have disappeared under my feet without warning. I locked my phone and put it face down on the table. Then I picked it up again, 10 seconds later. Then I put it down again. I must have done that 5 times. My coworker asked, "You good?" I said, "Yeah, just..." Weird message. I didn't tell him it was my mother. Saying it out loud made it too real. That night after shift, I sat in my car in the parking lot and finally opened the message again. Still there? No follow-up? No, please. No, I'm sorry. Just we need to talk. The same tone as that dinner. The same energy of decision. Like the conversation was happening on her terms. As if I hadn't spent 10 years living with consequence she chose. I didn't respond. Not that night. I drove home with my jaw tight, music off, hands locked on the steering wheel like I was bracing for impact. When I got inside, my apartment felt smaller than usual. I paced. I ate nothing. I stood by the window and watched the traffic move far below like I wasn't part of humanity. Then at 2 a.m. I finally typed, "What happened?" That was it. One question. No emotion, no accusation, just the facts. Her reply came 15 minutes later, as if she'd been waiting. "Rachel was caught. It's serious. Police are involved. We were wrong." I read it 3 times. On the third read, my chest did something strange, like it wanted to release a breath it had been holding for 10 years. But the relief didn't come. Instead, I felt suspended, like standing on a bridge and realizing the river underneath is deeper than you imagine. I typed again. "Caught doing what?" There was a pause, then 3 dots, then a longer pause. Finally, stealing. From us, from others. It started years ago. It got worse. She used your name too. Like, that last line made my stomach twist. Used my name? Of course she did. She'd always needed a shield. And I'd always been convenient. I didn't sleep. Not because I was wide awake, but because my brain kept trying to reconstruct the last decade like a crime scene. All the missing money. All the moments my parents said they were tight on cash. All the times Rachel went shopping and came home with new things. All the emergencies. All the tears. All the I don't know what I'd do without you. And then the thought that made my hands shake. If she was stealing from them too, then she wasn't just lying to protect herself. She was lying because she enjoyed what it gave her. Power, attention, control. The next day, my mother called. Not text, called. My phone rang, and for a second I didn't recognize the number. When I realized it was her, my whole body went rigid. I stared at the screen until it stopped ringing. Then it rang again. I didn't answer. A voicemail came through. Her voice hit me like a smell from childhood, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. She sounded older, tired. Please, she said, and her voice cracked. Please call me. I need to explain. We need to explain. We, not I, we. The same word she used when she wanted to spread responsibility around like it was butter. I listened once, then deleted it. Not because I didn't care, because I knew if I kept it, I'd replay it until I broke. That night, she sent a longer message. Paragraphs. My mother didn't write paragraphs unless she was either terrified or trying to control the narrative. She said Rachel had been caught using their debit card information for things she claimed were school expenses. She'd taken money out of their savings in small amounts so it wouldn't look obvious. Their retirement account had been hit. Their credit had been damaged. My father found out after getting a call from the bank about suspicious activity. And then, when confronted, Rachel blamed stress, anxiety, impulse problems. She cried. She said she didn't mean to. She said she needed help. Reading that made something cold form behind my ribs, because it sounded so familiar. In the crying, the fragile story, the I'm overwhelmed, the way everyone immediately moved into comfort mode. Except this time, there were consequences that they couldn't talk away. My mother wrote, the police came to the house, they asked questions, they brought paperwork, they asked about you. That line brought a flash of anger so sharp I almost threw my phone. They asked about me, even now. Even now, my name was still attached to her mess. I replied, why would they ask about me? My mother took hours to answer. Then, because of what Rachel said back then. Because we told them you had stolen. We told them you were dangerous. There it was, in plain text. Not implied, not vague, admitted. They had not only believed her, they had repeated it to authorities. They had made it official. They had poured my name into a system that doesn't forget. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to grief turn into rage. Not screaming rage, quiet rage. The kind that makes you feel like your bones are filled with ice. Because that meant something terrifying, even if I'd wanted to come back, even if I'd begged. They had already committed to the story in a way that could have followed me forever. A police report, a note, a suspicion, a file, all because Rachel cried at a dinner table. I typed, so what changed now? Her reply was immediate. They found proof. Bank records, transactions, surveillance at an ATM. Rachel confessed. Confessed. A word that should have felt like justice, but it didn't. It felt like a late train arriving after you've already walked miles in the rain. It is then my mother wrote, "Your father is sick. He wants to apologize. He hasn't been well for a while." That sentence almost made me laugh. Not because sickness is funny, because it was so predictable. The softening, the excuse, the attempt to wrap wrongdoing in sympathy. I knew my mother. She always needed a reason that made the pain understandable, something to protect herself from admitting the truth. They had chosen wrong because they didn't want to do the hard thing. They didn't want to question Rachel. They didn't want conflict. They didn't want to admit they could raise a child who lied that deeply. So they sacrificed the other one. Me. My mother asked if we could meet. Just coffee, just talk. No pressure. No pressure. As if 10 years of silence hadn't been pressure. As if I hadn't carried that night like a scar under my skin. I didn't answer for a day. I went to work, did my shift, smiled at coworkers, scanned boxes, signed paperwork, acted normal. But inside it felt like someone had opened an old room in my mind that had been sealed off, and all the stale air rushed out at once. That night I called Marcus, not my mother, Marcus. He answered on the second ring. "What's up?" he asked. I said, "My mother messaged." Silence. Then, "Yeah?" She said they were wrong. Marcus let out a breath. Of course they were wrong. I swallowed. They want to meet. Marcus didn't say yes or no. He asked, "What do you feel?" That question hit me harder than any accusation. What do you feel? I waited, because I wanted to say something like anger. But when I searched inside myself, I found nothing hot. No fire, just distance. Like the story belonged to someone else. I said, quietly, "I feel blank." Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's not blank. That's your body protecting you." After I hung up, I sat at my table with my laptop open and started searching, not for closure, for facts. I googled my hometown. I searched Rachel's name. I pulled up the county arrest log and the local police blotter. The kind of public record nobody reads until it's their family. I didn't even know if I'd find anything, but I needed to know whether my mother was telling the truth or just telling a version. And rare it was. Then I found it echoed on a small local news site under community updates. A small local news article, not a big headline, just a short piece under community updates. A woman in her early 20s was charged with multiple counts related to fraud and theft. Amounts listed, institutions involved, family member accounts. It didn't say she framed her brother. It didn't say she lied. But it confirmed enough. Rachel hadn't been misunderstood. She had been caught, on paper, in public, in a way my mother couldn't hide. I stared at the article until my eyes burned, and the weirdest thing happened. Instead of feeling vindicated, I felt tired, deep tired, like my soul was a muscle that had been clenched for 10 years and finally relaxed, only to realize how exhausted it was. Because even with proof, nothing gave me back what I had lost. Not the college money, not the friends, not the first years of adulthood that were supposed to be bright and open, not the relationships I never built because I was surviving, not the holidays alone, not the humiliation. Proof doesn't rewind time. My mother texted again. "Please, your father is asking for you. He cries at night. He keeps saying he should have listened. He says he made a terrible mistake. There it was again, the pull, the guilt hook, the attempt to make me responsible for their pain. As if I hadn't been carrying mine quietly for a decade. I typed slowly, making sure every word was clean. I'm not ready to meet. My mother replied immediately. But you have to. He's your father. Family is forever. Family is forever. I stared at that sentence until my hands stopped shaking. And then I wrote the only honest thing I had. You already chose. After I sent it, I expected to feel something. Relief, guilt, regret. But what I felt was stillness. Like I'd finally said out loud what my whole life had been shaped around. They chose Rachel, not once, not accidentally. They chose her over truth, over fairness, over me. And that choice didn't disappear just because she got caught. A week passed, then another. No messages, no calls. I thought maybe it was done. Then, on a random Thursday evening, my phone rang. A different number, but I recognized the area code. My hometown. My stomach dropped. I answered without thinking. Hello? A breath, then a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. My father. He sounded thinner, like the edges of him had worn down. It's me, he said. And for a moment, the world went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The kinds of quiet before a storm breaks. He said my name, the name I hadn't heard in his voice since he told me to leave. I don't know how to say this, he whispered. His voice broke. I was wrong. I should have felt something then, something dramatic, a movie moment, a crack in the armor. But all I felt was the weight of time. 10 years of no calls, 10 years of being a rumor, 10 years of rebuilding from nothing. He said, please let me explain. Please let me apologize. I didn't answer right away, and in that silence I realized the truth. He wasn't calling because he suddenly understood me. He was calling because his world had collapsed, because Rachel finally did something that forced him to see what he didn't want to see. And now the guilt was knocking at his door. He said again, I'm sorry. And my mouth opened, and then I closed it. Because I knew if I spoke, I might break. Or worse, I might let him pull me back. So I said calmly, I can't do this right now. His breathing hitched. Please, he whispered. I don't have much time. And there it was, the final lever. Time, mortality. The thing that makes people forgive, even when it costs them. My hands trembled. I stared at the floor. And I said the truth I didn't want to admit. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't trust you. Silence. Then he whispered, I understand. But I knew he didn't. Not really, because if he truly understood, he wouldn't be asking like this. He wouldn't be asking me to carry him again. I hung up, not with a slam, not with anger, with a quiet click. And when the call ended, I sat very still on my couch, staring at my own hands. Because the truth had finally arrived. But it arrived so late it felt like it belonged to another version of me. And I realized something terrifying. Sometimes the truth doesn't heal you. Sometimes it just proved you were alone all along. After I hung up on my father, I sat there for a long time without moving. Not because I was in shock, because my body was waiting for something. A crash, a scream, a wave of relief, a breakdown, something. But nothing came, just that same quiet distance, like my emotions were behind glass. The next morning I woke up with my jaw sore from clenching in my sleep. I went to work anyway. I did my shift. I joked with a guy on lane 10 about how the coffee machine tasted like it had been filtered through cardboard. I nodded through a meeting. I signed the paperwork. I smiled when someone showed me a picture of their kid. And all the while, the back of my mind kept returning to one sentence my father said, "I don't have much time." It wasn't even the words. It was the way he used them. Like time was a weapon now. Like time could force me into being the son they wanted. 2 days later, my mother texted again. "He's getting weaker. He wants to see you. Just once." Rachel is. She's not well either. Not well. The same language that always used to protect her from consequences. I stared at the screen and felt a heat behind my eyes. Not tears, pressure. Like anger that didn't know where to go. I typed, "What exactly did Rachel do? I want the truth." No soft version. My mother didn't respond for hours. Then she sent something long. Too long for a single message. It came in chunks. And with every chunk, I felt like I was reading the autopsy report of my own life. She said Rachel hadn't just stolen from them. She'd stolen from other people too. A roommate's rent money, a friend's debit card details, small transfers that were hard to notice until they added up. She'd used their parents' accounts for emergencies, but also for things my parents never saw. Online purchases, trips, cash withdrawals. My father had found a second email account tied to her name, a separate phone number, a hidden PayPal. She'd been living a whole other life while playing the fragile daughter at home. Then my mother wrote the sentence that made my hands go cold. She said she chose you because you were believable as the villain. She said you were quiet and people already thought you were cold. She said it was easy. I read that line 4 times. Easy. It was easy to erase me. Because I didn't scream. Because I didn't perform emotion the way Rachel did. Because I was steady. Because I was responsible. All the things I'd been praised for as a kid were the same things that made me disposable. I put the phone down and walked to my sink like I might throw up. I didn't. I just stood there staring at the faucet, listening to my own breathing. Then I turned the water on and washed my hands until they were red, like I could scrub off what I just learned. That night, I finally agreed to one thing. Not a visit, not a meeting. A video call. 15 minutes. That was the boundary I could handle. I didn't tell my mother that I'd already rehearsed it in my head like a disaster drill, where I would sit, how I would breathe, what I would do if my father cried, what I would do if Rachel showed her face. I wasn't going to be ambushed again. Not ever. The call came on Sunday, early evening. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop up. A glass of water I didn't touch. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt hollow. When the screen lit up, my mother's face appeared first, and it shocked me how much older she looked. Her hair had more gray. Her cheeks looked softer, heavier, like stress had pressed down on her from the inside. Behind her, I could see the living room. The same couch, the same lamp, the same wall decoration. It was like my life had split into 2 timelines. One where everything stayed exactly the same, and one where I had spent 10 years rebuilding from ash. My mother whispered my name like it was fragile. I didn't answer, not because I was being cruel, because I didn't know how to answer her anymore. Then the camera shifted, and my father appeared. He was sitting, not standing. That alone scared me. My father never sat unless he was resting after work. Now he sat like it was all he could do. His shoulders were narrower. His face looked drawn. His eyes, those eyes that used to judge everything, looked uncertain. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he swallowed hard. "I've rehearsed this," he said quietly, "and I still don't know how to start." I didn't offer him a starting point. I waited. He said, "I was wrong. About you. About everything." I watched his mouth move. It was surreal, like watching someone impersonate my father, because the man I remembered never admitted fault. He corrected other people. He didn't apologize. He said, "I believed her because it was easier than admitting I didn't know my own family." My mother flinched at it. He continued, "I told myself you were cold, that you didn't care. Because if you didn't care, then what we did was less cruel." That sentence hit me hard, because it was the first honest thing he'd said. He'd needed me to be a monster to justify what they did. My father's voice cracked. "I took your money," he whispered, "your savings." I told myself it was protecting the family. Protecting. He used the same word my mother used, as if they were guarding something noble. I finally spoke. My voice came out calm, almost flat. "That money was for college." My father nodded, eyes wet. "I know." My mother covered her mouth. My father said, "I ruined your future because I thought I was doing what a father is supposed to do." I stared at him, and I felt something move inside me. Not forgiveness, not pity, recognition. He still wanted to be the hero of his own story, even in apology. My mother leaned towards the camera. "Please," she whispered, "please come home. Just once we can talk. We can make it right." Make it right. I almost left. Almost. Yeah, because how do you make right 10 years? How do you refund lost time? How do you erase nights in parking lots? How do you rebuild the reputation burned into a small town's memory? How do you return the part of me that stopped expecting love? You can't. My father cleared his throat. "Rachel wants to apologize too," he said. I felt my spine tighten. My voice sharpened without me trying. "Is she there?" My mother looked away. My father hesitated. That hesitation was an answer. Then the camera shifted slightly, just enough, and I saw her, Rachel, in the corner, sitting on the couch. She looked older too, but not in the exhausted way my parents did. In the calculated way someone looks when they're waiting to see if their performance still works. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. She held the tissue. She looked fragile, like she always did. I stared at her. She looked at me and her mouth trembled. And for a second I remembered her as a kid, the little sister in pigtails, who used to follow me around, the one I used to defend at school, the one I used to carry on my shoulders at the fair. That memory tried to soften me. Then I remembered the dinner, and the storage office, and the years. The memory snapped like thread. Rachel whispered my name. Her voice was small. "I'm sorry," she said. I was messed up. I was jealous. I felt invisible." I watched her face closely. I expected anger to rise. But what rose instead was something colder. Because even now she was explaining herself, justifying, pointing her feelings as the reason. I didn't care about her feelings anymore. Her feelings had already cost me my life. Rachel continued, "I didn't think it would go that far." I blinked slowly. "You didn't think it would go that far?" I repeated. Rachel's eyes filled with tears again. I needed them to look at me," she whispered. "And you always had this way of looking like you didn't need anyone." I stared at her. Then I said quietly, "You stole my life because you didn't like how my face looked." Rachel flinched like I'd hit her. My mother started crying. My father's eyes dropped. Rachel whispered, "That's not." I cut her off. "No," I said. "It is." My father tried to speak. "Son, please." I shook my head. "I'm not your son when it's convenient," I said. "I'm not your son only when you're sick." Silence. This kind of a silence that used to mean I was losing. Now it meant something different. Now it meant I was finally holding the line. My mother cried, "We were wrong, we were wrong, we know. Please, just give us a chance. People make mistakes." That word again, mistake, like it was an accident, like they slipped and dropped a plate, not like they made a choice over and over for 10 years. I looked at my mother through the screen. "Mom," I said softly, "a mistake is forgetting a birthday." Her crying quieted. This was a decision. She shook her head, desperate. "We were scared." I nodded once. "You were scared Rachel would feel uncomfortable," I said. "So you destroyed me." My father's voice was hoarse. "I want to fix it," he whispered. I breathed in slowly. Then I said the thing I'd been afraid to say out loud for years. "You can't fix it," he said. "You can only live with it." My father's eyes squeezed shut. He looked like he was in pain. And I believed him. I believed he regretted it. But regret isn't payment. Regret doesn't rebuild a person. Rachel suddenly leaned forward, voice sharper. "So what? You're just going to punish us forever?" There it was, the mask slipping, the entitlement underneath. Like forgiveness was something she deserved because she finally got caught. I stared at her, and I said very calmly, "This isn't punishment. This is the consequence of your choices." Rachel's jaw clenched. My mother gasped like she wanted to scold Rachel but didn't know how without breaking the fragile act. My father looked like he'd been slapped, and I realized something. Even now, they still didn't know how to hold Rachel accountable without scrambling to protect her. It was instinct. It was their family culture. It was baked into them. And I was done being the sacrifice that kept their system stable. I glanced at the time. 13 minutes. I had promised 15. I could feel my hands starting to tremble under the table. So I stood. Not dramatically. It just stood. "I'm going to go," I said. My mother cried, "Please, please don't." My father whispered my name again, voice breaking. Rachel said, "So that's it?" I looked at them, all three, and I felt something settle in me like stone. Not hate, not rage, clarity. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I'm not coming back to a place where I was erased so easily." The truth came too late. My mother sobbed. My father covered his face. Rachel stared at me like she still expected me to bend. I didn't. I said one last sentence. "You already chose." And I ended the call. The screen went dark. My apartment was silent again. And for a moment I sat there, waiting for the familiar ache. But it didn't come. What came instead was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Space. Air. Like I'd been holding my breath for 10 years and finally exhaled. That night I didn't sleep perfectly. I still woke once. But when I woke up, my chest wasn't tight. My mind wasn't racing. Because the questions that had haunted me for a decade, what if they never find out, had finally been answered. They found out. And it changed nothing. Not because I was heartless, but because I'd already done the hardest thing. I'd already survived without them. I'd already built a life where their approval wasn't oxygen. A week later, my mother sent one more message. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. It just said, "We love you." I stared at it. Then I typed back. I hope you do. I just can't live inside your love anymore. And that was the end. Not with closure, not with forgiveness, with a boundary, with a life that finally belonged to me. Because the truth is, I didn't owe them my return. I owed myself my peace. Some doors close quietly, some never really do. If this story felt close to home, there's another one waiting for you here. This is Behind Closed Doors. Stay.